smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Welcome to Millennium News 24/7 Daily Local News Update. I'm your host, Jasmine McTague, watching the news headlines at this time. Details at this time. Our first story. It's a huge impact, one worker said. No one is coming into the office. People feel very uncertain about what's coming up. A Bevel, a communication consultancy firm, the desk remained mostly empty. It's definitely affected the strategy. Bevel partner Morgan Burrows said, "It's frustrating to know that the case has been spiking and it's not safe to be together in person right now. So many businesses had plans to bring more employees back to the office in January, but those plans have been tabled. I think everyone, including the businesses, employers, and employees, are feeling very discouraged and very anxious about this new COVID surge," said Catherine Wild. With Partnership for NYC, Wild runs the nonprofit and has been working with the city's largest employer to establish best practices in bringing employees back while the pandemic continues. Omicron is a big setback. Our latest survey at the end of October said they expected that 50% of the office workers would be back in office by the end of January, she said. Now all that is reversed. Wild said that delays will further cement the new hybrid approach that has been steadily taking hold. In fact, 80% of employers they have surveyed said they don't ever expect workers to come back 5 days a week. Many people have discovered that they can be anywhere in the world and get their job in New York City done, Wild said. That does not help New York City. It's a problem. When workers remain at home, they're spending less money in the city, in all the sectors, from the subways to the theaters and restaurants. The brick and mortar economy is really suffering, Wild said. They don't have the choice of working remotely. But for those who do have the choice, working from home will continue until there's greater confidence that coming to work is a safe bet. We're not requiring anyone to come in, Barrow said. We'd rather have them work from home in January. We can reassess and send out guidelines to the entire company. And now for our second story. Inglewood, Los Angeles. A suspect was taken into custody Wednesday night after a Los Angeles Police Department unit was hit, as well as a pedestrian during a wild pursuit. It is not known at this time where the pursuit started or at what time. Lake Elsinore PD was possibly the originating agency and location for the pursuit. The suspect struck the pedestrian at South Fifth Avenue and West Manchester Boulevard at 9:48 p.m. He was taken into custody at South 8th Avenue and West 108th Street at 10:06 p.m. in Englewood. An LAPD unit was rear-ended during the pursuit in San Diego Freeway and West Manchester Boulevard at an unknown time. And now for our next story. Home Alone actor Devin Rattray surrendered to authorities in Oklahoma on Wednesday after he was accused of assaulting his girlfriend, police said. Rattray, who played older brother Buzz McAllister in the 1990s Christmas movie, was released from jail shortly after his booking on 2 domestic assaults and battery complaints, police said. Rattray, 44, was in Oklahoma City earlier this month for an event called with Buzz, which was promoted as a screening of the film along with question and answer sessions with Rattray. In an affidavit says Rattray choked his girlfriend and said, "This is how you die." But Rattray denies all those allegations, Oklahoma City TV station K4 reported. Mr. Rattray denies ever laid a hand on her or did anything in regards to anything like that, his attorney Scott Adams said. Now to our next story. Videos obtained by Action News shows the gun battle between a Philadelphia police officer and a robbery suspect on Tuesday night, and the officer giving chase even after he was hit. The shootout happened right in front of a security camera. The gunman can be seen firing, then running away. The officer ducks for cover. Then, as the gunman takes off, he follows in pursuit. Radio, "I am shot, I am shot," the officer can be heard saying. The officer was later treated for his injuries at Temple University Hospital. The action cam was there on Wednesday as he was released while being saluted by his fellow officers. The chaos started around 10 p.m. Tuesday along the 400 block on Harlan Street in Kensington. The investigators say that that's where a police officer was talking to a robbery victim when the officer spotted a person matching the suspect's description. The officer tried to stop that suspect, and then there was a chase. Commissioner Daniel Outlaw says the suspect shot the officer twice in the shoulders. Another security camera captured the gunshot and officer running for cover. The suspect then ran onto a property along the 1400 block of Lawrence Street. The homeowner flagged down responding officer, and that's when police say the suspect shot the homeowner in the thigh. As officers closed in, investigators say the suspect shot himself in the head in the area of the North Legal Street. 2 officers transporting the suspect to the hospital were injured when they crashed into a car near the 10th and Oxford Street. Everyone involved was taken to Temple University Hospital for treatment. "You get scared, you know. My wife is paranoid," said resident Jay Rodriguez. "It is getting terrible. It's getting awful, and I'm scared for my kids and my husband. It's scary," said resident Terry Torres. And now a short break from our daily English news of Millennium News 24/7. Stay tuned.
Millennium TV, bridging communities worldwide. We broadcast diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Welcome to Millennium News 24/7 Daily Local News Update. Story at this time. No tornadoes were reported overnight on Washington coast. Forecasters are watching temperatures as a cold front moves south from Alaska Panhandle as Washington state prepares for the weather event that could leave temperatures in the teens for Seattle. Prepare that cold snap will herald strong winds Wednesday night, with the National Weather Service warning that thunderstorms moving onshore may produce strong winds, gusts, or a brave tornado. Moving through British Columbia on Wednesday, a cold front spreading inland through coastal Washington will leave parts of the West Coast subject to wind gusts potentially as high as 70 miles per hour. Northwest South cautions, the NWS cautions that the weather event could mean anything from small hail to sporadic lightning strikes to severe wind gusts and small tornadoes. Severe weather will linger in the form of a cold front, which is expected to leave western Washington in frigid temperatures for much of next week. Meteorologist Joe Bumgrag Sogrovnik from the Convention Zone told KRO's radio that the cold weather will likely become a serious hazard. On to our next story. A 24-year-old man was killed Wednesday night in a crash on Tropicana Avenue east of Spencer Street, which caused that intersection to be closed for several hours. According to Metro Police, the motorist collided with a Chevrolet van around 7:28 p.m. Police said the driver and the van was headed westbound on Tropicana and making a left turn into a private driveway when a crash occurred. Police say the motorist was riding a Harley Davidson, was headed eastbound and riding recklessly by splitting travel lanes and exceeding the speed limit. Police say that when the van turned in front of the motorcyclist applied his brakes and left around 250 feet of skid marks. The motorcyclist was pronounced dead on the scene. His identity will be released by Clark County coroner. The 50-year-old driver of the van remained at the scene and didn't show signs of impairment, police say. The crash remains under investigation. This is the 147th traffic-related fatality in Metro jurisdiction since the beginning of 2021. Our next story at this time. Going on with life after incarceration is a long, daunting, and sometimes lonely road. Thanks to a pair of New Orleans recording artists, a group of recently incarcerated women we'll have a little something extra to spend this holiday season. Venetia has been known to shake things up for the holidays, and this year was no different. I just figured, with us getting involved with helping women that may just be stuck in jail for something minor, I feel like their voices aren't really heard a lot, said Benicia. She says it stemmed from a conversation she had with a fellow New Orleans music artist, Karan, Squad Lee Joseph, who said he knows how it feels to have a run in with the wrong side of the law. Just for those women to let them know that you're not alone in this, we're going to try to help as much as we can. The pair joined forces and financial resources and got to work to see how they could make a Christmas dream come true. It didn't take long for them to compile a list of names of women to bail out. However, after conversations with many advocacy groups, lawyers, and even Sheriff Marlon Gusman, Den- Denicia soon realized the task of getting women out on bail in time for Christmas was too tall of a task. So she quickly came up with a plan B to instead help women who recently left jail. After you get out of prison, people think the work stops, but no, they are starting their life again, explained Denicia. Getting this deeply involved in the criminal justice system is not a road that Denicia thought this journey was going to take her on. But that's where the road led her. I was definitely anxious and a little nervous, she continues. Just to hear the stories, I think I really am interested in hearing it because we see a lot of women that's in jail and online, it's on TV, but I've never really been in contact with someone who actually is facing these things. Along with the smiles and holiday cheer, Denicia brought the group of women Visa gift cards. And now to our next story. A police officer and his mother of three were killed on Interstate 85 while on duty Wednesday morning. Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department confirmed Officer Mia Goodwin died in a crash involving four police cars and two tractor trailers. She had just recently returned from maternity leave. The crash happened in Interstate 85 around 3:40 a.m., but it was the second crash in several hours at the same spot. On Tuesday night around 10:30 p.m., a tractor trailer crashed and spilled sand all across southbound lane I-85. First responders stayed on the scene throughout the night cleaning up the crash. Officer Goodwin was part of a crew that came in Wednesday morning to relieve the initial crew that worked the crash site. At around 3:40 a.m., two other tractor trailers crashed while heading southbound I-85. They then careened into the first responders still working to clean and secure the original crash site. Goodwin died at the scene of the second crash. Three other officers were taken to the hospital, treated for injuries, and released. We are asking for your prayers, not just for the Goodwin family, but for all of the CMPD family and for our great city. Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department Chief Johnny Jennings said during a press conference Wednesday morning. And now, a short break from the daily English news of Millennium News 24/7. Stay tuned.
Millennium TV, bridging communities worldwide. We broadcast diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Welcome to Millennium News 24/7 daily local news update. And the story at this time. Former President Donald Trump returned to Supreme Court Thursday in a last-ditch effort to keep documents away from the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Trump's attorney argued in their petition to the Supreme Court that both the Constitution and the Presidential Records Act give former president a clear right to protect their confidential records from premature dissemination. This case presents a clear threat to that right. A federal appeals court ruled against Trump 2 weeks ago, but prohibited documents held by the National Archives from being turned over before the Supreme Court has a chance to weigh in. Trump appointed three of the nine justices. Trump sued the House January 6th committee and the National Archives to stop the White House from allowing the release of documents related to the insurrection. Trump is claiming that as a former president, he has the right to assert executive privileges over the records, arguing that releasing them would damage the presidency in the future. But President Joe Biden determined that the documents were in the public's interest and that the executive privilege should therefore not be invoked. The documents include presidential diaries, visitor logs, speech drafts, handwritten notes concerning the events of January 6th from the file of a former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and a draft executive order on the topic of election integrity. The archive has said, the House committee has said the records are vital to its investigation into the roundup to the deadly riot that was aimed to overturning the results of the 2020 presidential election. On to our next story. Russian President Vladimir Putin urged the West on Thursday to immediately meet Russia's demand for security guarantees precluding NATO's expansion to Ukraine, saying the U.S. is on the threshold of our home. Speaking during a marathon annual news conference, the Russian leader welcomed talks with the U.S. that are set to start in Geneva next month as a positive move, but sternly warned that Moscow expects the discussion to produce quick results. We have clearly and precisely let them know that any further NATO expansion eastward is unacceptable, Putin said. Last week, Moscow submitted draft security documents demanding that NATO deny membership to Ukraine and other former Soviet countries and roll back the alliance military deployment in Central and Eastern Europe. A key principle of NATO alliance is that membership is open to any qualifying country. It is us who are putting missiles near the US borders, Putin said angrily. No, it is the US who came to our home with its missiles. They are already on the threshold of our home. Is some excessive demand not to place any strike weapon systems near our home. Moscow presented its demand amid soaring tensions over Russian troops buildup near Ukraine that has had stoked fear of a possible invasion. US President Joe Biden warned Putin in a video call earlier this month that Russia will face severe consequences if it attacks Ukraine. Russia has denied having plans to launch an attack, but has described a NATO expansion and weapon deployment to Ukraine as a red line. Asked Thursday if he could provide a guarantee that Russia will not invade Ukraine, Putin snapped in response. It's you who must give us guarantee and give them immediately. now and not have idle talks about it for decades. How would the Americans respond if we put our missiles on the US border with Canada or Mexico? He exclaimed. The US and its allies have said they won't give Russia that kind of guarantee on Ukraine that Putin wants. American officials are conferring with European allies in advance of the Geneva talk. The Russian leaders charged during these news conferences that the West has swindled, blatantly cheated Moscow by offering verbal pledges in the 1990s not to expand NATO's presence east, and then enlarging and incorporate former Soviet bloc countries in Central and East Europe and the ex-Soviet republicans in the Baltics. Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined NATO in 1999, followed in 2004 by Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and the former Soviet Republic of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania or Lithuanian. In subsequent years, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia also joined, bringing NATO's membership to 30 nations. It's not us who's threatened anymore, Putin said. It is us who came to the US or British borders or somewhere else. No, they have come to us, and now they say that Ukraine will be in NATO, or they will just put bases and strike weapons there on bilateral basis. He accused the West of trying to make Ukraine anti Russia, consist- consistently be fed up with modern weapons and brainwashing the population. Russia can't keep living in anticipation of the looming security threat posed by possible deployment of Western weapons in Ukraine, Putin said. Should Russia live consistently constantly looking back at what's going on and what new weapon systems are put there, he exclaimed. We need to think about ensuring our security. He argued that Western weapons could encourage hawkish forces in Ukraine to attempt to regain control over Russia backed separatist regions by force and even try to reclaim Crimea, which Russia annexed from Ukraine in 2014. Now, for our next story. Fed by rain and snow melts from mountains, this valley nestled among the northwest Afghanistan jagged peaks was once fertile. But the climate has changed in the last few decades, locals said, leaving the earth barren and its people struggling to survive. Many have fled, heading to neighboring Iran or living in abject poverty in camps from a displaced within Afghanistan as repeated droughts parched the lands and shovel pastures. I remember from my childhood there was a lot of snow in winters, and in the spring we had a lot of rain, said 53-year-old Abdul Ghani, a local community leader in the village of Sangat Atash in the hard-struck province of Bangash, Badgesh. But since a few years ago, there has been droughts. There is no snow. There is much less rain. It's not even possible to get one bowl of water from drain pipes to use, he said. As he observed the Red Crescent Society handing out emergency winter food supplies to farmers whose crops have completely failed. The severe drought, now in its second year, has dramatically worsened the already desperate situation in the country. Battered by 4 decades of war, Afghans have also had a contend with the coronavirus pandemic and an economy in free fall following the freezing of international funding after the Taliban seized power in mid August amid a chaotic withdrawal of US and NATO troops. Millions can't feed themselves, and the aid groups warn of rising malnutrition and humanitarian catastrophe for many families. In Sanatash area, the Crescent Aid is their only lifeline for harsh winters. The organization is regional head for Western Afghanistan, Mustafa Nabikil, said 558 families have received food over 3 days. Flour, rice, beans, cooking oil, sugar, salt, tea, and high calorie vitamin fortified biscuits. Badgas farmers are particularly vulnerable as the region lacks the irrigation system, leaving them dependent on the weather. Nabikil said, if it rains, they will eat. If it doesn't, they won't. Their desperation is palpable. There's no solution. We are just destroyed, said Ghani. We can't go anywhere to foreign countries. We have no money. We have nothing. In the end, we must dig our graves and die. Nesafar Meghadi, head of Afghanistan delegation of International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, said drought is leading to worrying food shortages with around 22.8 million people, more than 55% of Afghanistan's population, experiencing high levels of acute food shortages. Severe drought has affected more than 60% of the country's provinces, he said, but there is no single province not affected since some are facing serious or moderate droughts. On to our next story. Two new British studies provide some early hints that the Omicron variant of the coronavirus may be milder than the Delta version. Scientists stress that even if the findings of these early studies holds up, any reduction in severity needs to be weighed against the fact Omicron spreads much faster than Delta and it's more able to evade vaccines. Sheer numbers of infections could still overwhelm hospitals. Still, the new studies released Wednesday seem to bolster earlier research that suggests Omicron may not be as harmful as the Delta variant, said Manuel Oscano Jr., a Vanderbilt University biochemist who studies viruses. Caution optimism is perhaps the best way to look at this, he said. An analysis from the Imperial College London COVID-19 response team estimates hospitalization risk for Omicron cases in England, finding people infected with the variant are around 20% less likely to go to the hospital at all. Those infected with the Delta variant and 40% less likely to be hospitalized for a night or more. That analysis included all cases of COVID-19 confirmed by the PCR test in England in the first half of December, in which the variant could be identified. 56,000 cases of Omicron and 269,000 cases of Delta. A separate study out of Scotland by scientists at the University of Edinburgh and other experts suggest that the risk of hospitalization was two-thirds less with Omicron than Delta, but that the study pointed out that the nearly 24,000 Omicron cases in Scotland were predominantly among younger adults ages 20 to 39. Younger people are much less likely to develop severe cases of COVID 19. This national investigation is one of the first to show that Omicron is less likely to result in COVID 19 hospitalization than Delta. Researchers wrote, while the findings are early observations, they are encouraging. The author wrote, the findings have not yet been reviewed by other experts. The gold standard is scientific research. Lascano noted that the studies have limitations. For example, the findings are specific to certain points in time during a quickly changing situation in the United Kingdom, and in other countries may not fare the same way. Matthew Benedict Benicker, sorry, director of clinical virology at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, said that uh, that in Scottish studies, the percentage of younger people was almost twice as high for the Omicron group compared with the Delta group, and that could have biased the conclusion to less severe outcomes caused by Omicron. He nonetheless said that the data were interesting and suggested Omicron might lead to less severe disease. But he added, it is important to emphasize that if Omicron has much higher transmission rates compared to Delta, the absolute number of people requiring hospitalization might still increase, despite less severe diseases in most cases. And now a short break from the daily English news of Millennium News 24/7. Stay tuned.
Millennium TV, bridging communities worldwide. We broadcast diverse international content from Europe, Asia, Africa, and now right here in the USA. Watch us via Roku on your smart TV. Submit your own content to 1530entertainmentllc@gmail.com. Download the Millennium TV app from the App Store to stream our shows anywhere, anytime. Millennium TV.
Welcome. Welcome to Millennium News 24/7 daily local news. Now, our story at this time. For Afghanistan, 2021 was punctuated by the chaos of the U.S. withdrawal and an uncertain next chapter. The Taliban, who were unseated as the country's rulers by the U.S. led coalition after 9/11 attacks 20 years ago, could not be stopped by the collapsing Afghan military and Western backed government that fled. They quickly took power back in mid August, as the Associated Press has revealed by former President Hamid Karzai, to help keep Kabul from falling into chaos and deadly violence. 4 months into the Taliban rule, Afghanistan is facing a looming economic meltdown and humanitarian catastrophe. Billions of dollars worth of country's assets abroad, mostly in the US, have been frozen, and international funding to the country has ceased. The world is waiting before the extending any formal recognition to the new ruler in Kabul, worry the Taliban could impose a similar harsh regime as when they were in power 20 years ago, despite their assurance to the to The contrary, the Taliban urge patience, but some signs are worrisome. For instance, girls are not allowed to attend high school in most provinces, and though women have returned to their job in much of the healthcare sector, many female civil servants have been barred from coming to work. However, security has improved under the Taliban following their crackdown on crimes, and humanitarian organizations say they can now reach parts of the country that were previously no go areas. Here, Associated Press reporters who covered the Taliban lightning sweep across the country and subsequent fallout reflects on the story of their own experiences. This last year has been particularly tumultuous one. It began really with the announcement by President Joe Biden that the last of the soldiers, US soldiers and NATO soldiers would leave Afghanistan, but I'm not sure that anyone though thought that it would result in such chaos and such real misery for so many. Even Afghan President Ar- Ashraf Ghani, I think, was really taken by surprise that the Americans were leaving and NATO would leave. I don't think that he ever felt that they would actually. And certainly, we talked at time to many people within the army, people within the government who were really surprised at the announcement. Even though the US had been talking to the Taliban, had negotiated the agreement, had said that as of May 1st, they would begin this withdrawal, there really was a belief among many Afghans that it wouldn't happen. Even before the Taliban took power in 2018, there was a Gallup survey, and it showed that barely 2% of the population had any faith in their future in the next 5 years. And that was years before the Taliban took power. So the groundwork was already there. The people was very frustrated. The poverty level was quite high already. There were very few jobs for people. People felt really discouraged with the future of their country. So then, when the Americans were leaving and the embassies were announcing that they were going to close, it was almost like a snowball gaining momentum. Rumors spread on social media that said the Americans will take anybody who will show up at the airport. Just arrive. You don't even need to have your national papers. Well, for many Afghans, I think there seems as their opportunity for a better life, their opportunity to go to America, to go to the West, to have a future that they really had not seen as being a possibility in their own country, even before the Taliban arrived. And then with the arrival of the Taliban, of course, there was a tremendous apprehension and tremendous fear, particularly among the young generation who had not been there when the Taliban last ruled between 1996 and 2001. So I think that all of that led to this massive surge towards the airport in Kabul, and no one was prepared for it. And for me, in many ways, that really was a bit of an indictment of the last 20 years, that there was such a lack of hope, faith in the future. And the civil society whom so much faith had been put seemed to be first ones to make this rush to the airport because they feared for their lives. They feared for their future. They feared for the future of their children, so that they really contributed to that chaos in those iconic images of young men rushing to the C-17 aircrafts, hanging on the wheels, trying to get into the aircraft. All of this uncertainty and fear contributed to that. And really, the last 20 years, that didn't give them much hope for the future. But I want to say that there was no evidence for when the Taliban last ruled, that there would be widespread retribution killing. Sadly, though, vengeance killings have been a hallmark of every regime change in Afghanistan. There were scores of retribution killings when the Taliban overthrew were overthrown in 2001 by the US backed Afghan allies and human rights groups have reported upwards of 80 revenge killings, particularly of former military people by returning Taliban rulers. However, until now, there has been no evidence of a systematic retribution. On to our next story. A Biden administration effort to reunite children and parents who were separated under President Donald Trump's zero tolerance border policy has made increasing progress as it nears the end of its first year. The Department of Homeland Security planned Thursday announced that 100 children, mostly from Central America, are back with their families, and about 350 more reunifications are in process after it adopted measures to enhance the program. I would have loved to have this happen much more quickly, but we are working progress and I feel that we are gaining momentum, said Michelle Brain, Executive Director of the Administration Families Reunification Task Force. President Joe Biden issued an executive order on his first day in office to reunite families that were separated under Trump's administration, widely condemned practice of forcibly separating families and children at the U.S. Mexican border to discourage illegal immigration. The work of the task force has been complicated by numbers of factors, including inadequate or missing records on separate families, the sheer numbers of cases, and the fact that many parents are in remote Central American communities and were unable to track down their children or get to the United States to retrieve them. In September, the task force has reunited 50 families when the administration announced a partnership to speed up the efforts with the International Organization of Migration and the creation of web portals juntos.gov or juntos.gov or together.gov for parents to contact the US government and work through the unification process. About 5,500 children were forcibly removed from their parents under Trump, mostly in 2018, as his administration sought to stop an increase in people crossing the U.S. Mexican border with criminal prosecution, even if the migrants were presenting themselves to the authorities to seek asylum as permitted under the law. Amid widespread condemnation, including from Republicans, Trump stopped the practice in June of 2018, just days before a judge ordered an end to the program in response to a lawsuit filed by the American Civil Liberties Union. Brain said Barney said in an interview ahead of Thursday's announcement that officials believe there are still about 1,150 children whose whereabouts have not been confirmed. The total fluctuates as some cases are resolved with new information and new ones emerge, including some who have reached through the new web portal. Obviously, this is nowhere near the end, Bahrain Barney said. This is just the beginning of the ramp up, and hopefully, families will see the reunifications are happening and they will feel confident coming forward. On to our next story. Pope Francis urged Vatican cardinals, bishops, bureaucrats Thursday to embrace humility this Christmas season, saying their pride, self interest, and the glitter of our armor was preventing their spiritual lives and corrupting the church's mission. As he has in the past, Francis used his annual Christmas address to take Vatican administrators to task for their previous moral and personal failings, denouncing in particular those pride-filled clerics who rigidly hide before the Catholic Church traditions rather than seek out the neediest with humility. As they have in the past, cardinals and bishops set stone face as they listened to Francis lecture them in the Hall of Blessings, which was otherwise decked out with in jolly twinkly Christmas trees and poinsettias. The humble are those who are concerned not simply with the past, but also with the future, since they know how to look ahead to the spread of their branches, remembering the past with gratitude, Francis told them. The proud, on the other hand, simply repeat, grows rigid, and enclose themselves in that reputation, feeling certain about what they know and fearful of anything new because they cannot control it. The proud who are so inward looking are consumed with their own interest, the pontiff said. As a consequence, they neither learn from their sins nor are they genuinely open to forgiveness. This is a tremendous corruption disguised as good. We need to avoid it, he added. Since becoming a pope in 2013, Francis has used the Christmas address to rail against the grey, as the Holy See's bureaucracy is known, denouncing that spiritual Alzheimer's that some members suffer and that the resistance he had encountered to his efforts to reform and revitalize the institution and broader the Catholic Church. Those reforms kicked into high gear this year, and some of the top Catholic hierarchy bore the brunt as Francis ordered a 10% pay cut for cardinals, imposed a €40 or $45 gift cap for Holy See personnel, and passed a law allowing cardinals and bishops to be criminally prosecuted by the Vatican's own tribunal. On top of that, Francis added his Christmas greeting in the form of another public bowing beating of Vatican clerics who normally are treated with utmost differences by their underlining and the faithful at large. Francis told them to stop hiding behind the armor of their titles and to recognize that they, like the biblical figures of Naaman, a wealthy and decorated general, are lepers in need of healing. The story in Man reminds us that Christmas is the time when each of us, need to find the courage to take off our armor, discard the trappings of our roles, our social recognitions, and the glitter of this world, and adopt the humility of Naaman, he said. Francis also repeated his call for traditional minded clerics to stop living in the past, saying that their obsession with the old doctrine and liturgy concealed a spiritual worldliness that was corrupting. Seeking those kinds of reassurances is the most perverse fruit of spiritual worldliness, for it reveals a lack of faith, hope, love. It leads to an inability to discern the truth of things, he said. Francis this year took his biggest step yet to rein in the traditionalist wing of the church, reimposing restrictions on celebrating the old Latin Mass that Pope Benedict the 16th had relaxed in 2007. He intensified those restrictions last weekend with the new set of rules that forbids even the publication of Tridentine Mass times in parish bulletins. Francis said The proud who remain stuck in the past and closed in their little world has neither past nor future, roots or branches, lives with the bitter taste of melancholy that weighs on their hearts as most precious of the devil's portions. All of us are called to humility because of all of us are called to remember and to give life. We are all called to find a right relationship with our roots and our branches. And without those two things, we become sick, destined to disappear, he warned. Now to our next story. Aussie officials and religious leaders on Wednesday denounced suggestions voiced by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and his spokesman that the integration of Bosnia into European Union will be challenging because of its large Muslim population. Orban spokesman Sultan Kovacs has tweeted that the challenge with Bosnia is how to integrate a country with 2 million Muslims. During this long speech on Tuesday in Budapest, right wing populist Orban said Hungary supports Bosnia EU bid, aiding that as an EU member, Hungary had to mobilize a lot of energy to overcome the enlargement fatigue that has taken hold of the European Union. I am doing my best to convince Europe's great leaders that the Balkans may be further away from them than from Hungary, but how we manage the security of state in which 2 million Muslims live is a key issue for their security too. Reactions in Bosnia was sharp, with some Bosniak parties asking for a ban on Oban's plans officials visit to Sarajevo and to head of the Islamic communities. Grand Mufti Hussein Kavazovic calling his statement xenophobic and racist. If such ideologies become the basis on which the policies of the United Europe are based, then it takes us back to the times when European unity was to be built on similar fascist, Nazi, violent, and genocidal ideologies that led to the Holocaust and other horrific crimes, he said in a statement. The Bosniak people, members of the country's tripartite presidency, Safik Dansforovic called Oban's statement shameful and rude. It is not a challenge for the EU to integrate 2 million Bosnian Muslims because we are an indigenous European people who have always lived here. We are Europeans, he said. Bosnia, which is made up of Bosniak Serbs, Croats, is going through its gravest political crisis since the end of the Civil War in 1990s. With tragic support of Russia and Serbia, Bosnian Serbs are threatening to form their own army, judiciary, and tax authority, reviving fears of another bloody breakup of the Balkan country. During his speech on Tuesday, Oban also said Hungary wouldn't support EU sanctions against Bosnia's Serb leader Milorad Dodik as threatened by Germany and some other member states because of his separatist stance. Sarajevo has lost its nerve and it's attacking everyone Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, and now Hungary. Not to mention Russia, Dodik said Wednesday, referring to the support he has alleged received from those countries. Orban has been known for his anti-migration policies, claiming Muslim migrants are the greatest threat to Europe's Christian values. He has also been supporting quick ascensions of Serbia into the EU despite the increasingly autocratic policies of his ally, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. More than 100,000 people were killed and millions were left homeless during the 1992 to 1995 war in Bosnia, when the Bosnian Serbs tried to create ethnically pure territories in order to join them in neighboring Serbia. And this was in our daily local news update of Millennium News 24/7. Log in to get the latest news. All of our social networking sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, is Millennium News 24. Our YouTube channel is News Channel M24. Viewers now on both networking, broadcasting, Android and iOS devices, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, also all smart TV platforms. Please enjoy our entertainment and latest news and views. Our Millennium TV app, Millennium TV USA Android, and Millennium News Google, www.millenniumnewstv24.com. Stay with Millennium News 24, and thank you for watching.